if you saw my 2019 recap video about the Subcontrabassoon project, you know that one of my goals for 2020 is to keep you all more informed about the progress in the project. So rather than kind of save up all of my progress for these big giant videos, do smaller videos just to let you all know what's going on. So this video is going to be, with that in mind, just a brief video talking about some recent progress I've made. Some of these update videos are going to be short and maybe a little bit less exciting. This one is one of those. Other videos in the future might be pretty significant. But regardless, my hope is that by doing things this way, I won't have as many people coming to my channel and asking me if the project's still going. That way, anyone who comes to my channel is going to see at least some Subcontrabassoon videos in the recent feed. Okay, so with that out of the way, what's the Subcontrabassoon progress I've been working on this week? Well, so the big thing I've worked on, and once again, not all of these are exciting. You may remember that my goal, or kind of my focus at the moment, is getting the frame going. So this is the top and bottom frame that are kind of gonna hold everything together. And I'm gonna pull up a picture of that real quick, just so you all can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we have this frame assembly, and then the top and the bottom. And so these tenons here are going to be what holds the body joints in place. So there's matching on the top and the bottom. And of course, you probably have seen that the flat pieces I've had laser cut for quite some time. I had a bit of a delay on the tenons themselves. So these were laser cut. The tenons I'm going to machine out of stainless steel pipe. And while I got 9 out of the 10 pieces of pipe I needed just fine, the 10th piece turned out to be difficult. I had to order it twice, and they kept sending me the wrong one. I needed Schedule 80 2.5-inch nominal pipe, and they kept sending me Schedule 40, which the ID is too big for the tenon I needed to make. So this week, instead, I guess I should say, I did finally get the correct piece. So my the very next thing I'm going to be doing is machining those tenons to either solder or weld onto these plates. But in order to do that, I need some way to align those tenons on the plates. And that's what I focused on this week. So here we have some just alignment discs. The the smaller shelf matches the holes in these plates, and then the outer ring is going to match the inner diameter of the tenons. That way, I can put these discs in place, put the tenon, the machined tenon, over it, and know that it's going to be concentric. And so each of these are switched, are slightly different. So here are those four. For the bottom plate, the top plate has 5. Some of these are easy to get switched around. So all 5 of those. And then the bell assembly has its own. The guides won't be welded in place. The guides will just set in there. The tenon itself will be attached permanently to the plate, either through soldering or welding. I still haven't made a firm commitment one way or another. I'm leaning towards soldering at the moment, just to reduce the temperature, which is going to reduce warping. And I have some pictures of that in process, in case anyone is interested in that. There we go. Okay, so first of all, now one of the kind of, you all may know that I'm doing most of this work at my dad's shop. But my dad almost exclusively works in stainless steel because he does mostly food grade work, which is great if you need scrap stainless steel, less great if you're hoping for scrap aluminum. Machining these kind of discs out of stainless steel, it's not hard, but it just would have been a little bit overkill. Luckily, one of his neighbors on his, his business neighbors, is a water jet cutter, and he happened to have some pieces of 1/2-inch thick aluminum that he had cut out of the middle of pieces, and his customer didn't need the insides, so he was able to sell us some pieces that I used. So I was able to make these out of aluminum. So first of all, I put a hole in the middle, and that's for machining purposes. You'll see in a second how I actually got this on a lathe. And then I used a hole saw just to cut out the rough outer diameter, just so I didn't have to machine more than necessary. And so that ended up with the pieces that looked like this, with just that initial hole and the outer diameter. And there's actually 2 pieces here, the really big ones. We didn't have a hole saw big enough, so I did end up having to machine these down from like 6 inches all the way down to 3 3/4. So that wasn't fast, but I got it done. And then I used an expanding mandrel in that center hole, put it on a lathe, and just turned down both outer diameters. And it actually needs to be a pretty precise fit. If it's too tight, it won't fit in at all. Or the worst case scenario, it'll fit in just well enough until you put heat on it, then it warps enough, and then you have to bang on it and in order to get it out. But it also, if it's too loose, it's not gonna do its job very well. All right, so These will allow me to do the next step, and I should also say I can also use these as gauge blocks when I'm machining the tenons themselves, just to test fit, to make sure that it's going to be a good fit. Okay, so that's all those pieces. The other thing I tried this week was a little bit weirder. So if we go back to the Design Explorer, you'll see that there's these gaskets up top, right here. So So eventually, I'm going to have, this is one of the U-bends. This is the U-bend that's between the C sharp and the C tone hole. And I have this separate plate frame for the U-bend. And this is going to be bolted onto the main plate. Now these are going to be assembled somewhat permanently. So some silicone sealant, and then there's all these screw holes to screw it in place. But ideally, I want this piece to be able to come off on and off fairly easily for cleaning purposes. So I don't have to disassemble the entire instrument if I ever need to get inside of the bore like I have to do on my contrabassoon. So they need a gasket to make sure that that seal is good. Now, traditionally, on bassoons, the U-bend gasket is made out of cork. The gasket's traditionally made out of cork, but I was hoping to find a more reliable material. Whenever you're dealing with pieces of cork that are like, sorry, I just realized all that banging is right by my microphone. That's probably really annoying. When you're trying to get a piece of cork like this big, not only is it really expensive, or well, okay, not really expensive, but more expensive than you might think. There's also all these little pores. Anyway, long story short, I had hoped to find a better solution. And the first thing I tried is silicone. So here is a silicone gasket, and you can see it's designed to fit the wing frames, and then that would just go in between there. And then there's, on this bend, you'd have 4 U-bend bolts, or U-bend nuts, to hold it in place. So the simple solution would be to just 3D print a guide and then cut around that. But I decided to try out something a little less conventional. So I don't know how many of you all might have a 3D printer, but the prices are coming down. They're pretty affordable, and they can do a lot of things. However, for me, I would never get enough use out of a laser cutter, a dedicated laser cutter, in order to justify the cost. But as I was reading around the internet, I found this right here. So this is someone who, well, he made a pretty obvious in hindsight leap and realize that if you have a 3D printer, you already have the most expensive part of a laser cutter. You have a 2-axis computer-controlled machine. So really all you need is a laser and a way to turn the laser off and on exactly when you need it to, and then you have a laser cutter. So if you go to this link here, or if you just search for Prusa laser engraving, you'll probably find this. He walks you through the process of turning your 3D printer, in this case specifically a Prusa Mark III, into a makeshift laser cutter. And that's what I did. It's actually kind of interesting how it works. It uses the fan cable. So 3D printers need to be able to turn on and off the fan at very precise moments, and they need to be able to turn on the fan in varying degrees. So what this design does is it takes that cable that should be controlling the fan and uses that to modulate the laser instead. And then he wrote a specific piece of software called Laravel that generates G-code for this setup. And that's how I ended up laser cutting these. Now, once again, this is probably not the best way to do it, but I've had this laser set up on my 3D printer for a while and haven't really had a good opportunity to try it out for something functional yet. So I figured this was a good opportunity. Now, however, as it turns out, silicone was a pretty terrible choice for laser cutting because of its high thermal resistance. In order to laser cut this, it required 24 passes. And I don't know how well you can see this, the edges are still a little bit ragged where it didn't cut through all the way. So these are not the gaskets that I'm going to use on the prototype, but it did give me enough. I did find it interesting enough. I went ahead and ordered a sheet of neoprene, which has a much lower thermal resistance, which should make it much better for laser cutting, and should still be. I mean, I'm not going to be operating the Subcontrabassoon in an oven, so thermal resistance is not that big of a deal. So I'm going to try that soon, and that is the main things I wanted to talk about today as far as what I've done this week. So I'm going to real quick read through some of the questions while we're here, and then try to finish in a little bit more of a reasonable time frame than a lot of my always time for a Borg joke. Okay. So already answered that. Brett took care of the 15. Yeah, that is a very common question, just because of how rarely you'll see the 15 MA or 15 MB in actual music. But yeah, that it is meant to symbolize 2 octaves. How heavy will the Subcontrabassoon be? So the old calculations were based off of Delrin, which is very dense, a good deal denser than wood. So hold on real quick. I'm going to go to www.subcontrabassoon.com, if I go to the FAQ, because I do not have this memorized. Yeah. So my estimation was that the weight of a wooden subcontrabassoon would be 35 pounds or 16 kilograms. Where did I include the weight of a Delrin one? Sorry about that. Huh. Okay. But since I did that calculation on the weight of a full Delrin subcontrabassoon, I've switched over to using ABS for the large joints, and I'm only using Delrin for the 6 smallest joints. So it's probably going to be about like 42 pounds-ish. You know, like 18, 19 kilograms or something. So not light, but maybe not quite as heavy as you might expect. The important thing to remember about any woodwind is it is mostly air. The body of the instrument is just a container for what's really important. Yeah, Maria, that was like I said, it was overkill. This is probably going to be the last time I ever laser cut silicone. But now I know not to do that anymore. Okay, and should it be used in an orchestra? I mean, composers have already written specific parts for the 32-foot stop of the organ because it's the only subcontra-based instrument available. So I think it would be nice if composers had other options for 32-foot register passages. I don't see why it couldn't be used in the orchestra, but I think that's realistically a couple of decades away. I think it's gonna need to establish itself in like chamber settings, like large bassoon ensembles first, kind of like some of the larger flutes or larger clarinets. Okay, and marching subcontrabassoon. Well, marching band. This could cause some contention, but marching band is one of my least favorite musical activities, so I would leave that to someone else, regardless of the weight. Jake. Okay, Jacob, make sure if I did get your email and overlooked it, I apologize. I certainly wouldn't have meant to ignore you. Make sure the email that you have is correct. If you go to subcontrabassoon.com, there's a contact. However, I don't make... I tend not to sell reeds anymore. I didn't feel justified charging what I need to charge in order to make reeds that I'm happy with. And unfortunately, I don't really have good recommendations for other reeds because I haven't bought a contrabassoon reed since like 2003. So my suggestion would be to ask around for some suggestions for people that do use purchased contrabassoon reeds. I do know the woman who runs gobassoon.com, and I know that she's a fine contrabassoonist and a fine reed maker. So that would probably be my first the first place I'd look. But once again, I haven't personally tried her contrabassoon reeds, so I can't vouch for them in that way. Yeah, but the email, make sure you use the correct email from the contact page. The one you kind of posted there isn't quite right. Yeah. Well, sweeter than anything, that's personally, like, my favorite settings are kind of small chamber settings. Unfortunately, as a contrabassoonist, your opportunities to play in those sort of settings are pretty limited. Also, the money's just not there. Some of my orchestras have a chamber series, but there are much fewer services, much fewer rehearsals. Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Is it Joner? Yeah, I'll admit I have been a little curious if some crazy film score composer is going to decide that they need a subcontrabassoon for something. Ever since I saw those pictures from the Lion King soundtrack, where at some point they had 4 contrabassoons. I don't know what for. What would be the comfortable range for the instrument? Ryan asked. So I would consider the subcontrabassoon a success if it could play from the low A, 3 ledger lines below bass clef, to the upper tenor F, 2 ledger lines above bass clef. I'm going to try to experiment with a additional harmonic vent to hopefully raise that up to C. So the high right of spring C, but sounding 2 octaves lower. But as that range is well doubled by both the bassoon and the contrabassoon, I don't consider that critical. So if it can play that range, great. If not, oh well. As far as staccato in the low register, I think I'm just going to have to try it out and also experiment with reeds quite a bit. That's exactly it. Making the ideal bassoon reed is still in process. Contrabassoon reeds even more so. So even after the instrument subcontrabassoon prototype is ready to play, there's going to be some experimentation necessary in getting the right reeds. Okay. So, we're at about 30 minutes, and that was kind of my goal for this live stream. So if anyone has any last questions before we call it a stream, now's the time. Yeah, I mean, if anyone... Will it have similarities with the octo contrabass clarinet? Well, it'll be in the similar range. However, the timbre is going to be the big distinguishing factor. So the characteristic of the clarinet family is the fact that it doesn't have even harmonics, whereas the double reed family does have strong even harmonics, second, fourth, sixth, so on and so on. I suspect it will sound significantly different. Of course, we're still with the work Jared's doing. We're still kind of learning what clarinets in that register actually sound like. I mean, for decades, all we had to go off of was, black and white pictures of the old LeBlanc octo contras. So it will be nice to finally get some better answers to the question of what an octo contra clarinet sounds like. and eventually be able to hear subcontrabassoon and octocontra clarinet side by side and see how they're different, or if they are different enough to justify the extra difficulty in manufacture of a subcontrabassoon, because subcontrabassoon, in order to play the same notes, not only has to be conical, it has to be twice as long. Genre, yes, I have used software to emulate the sound of the subcontrabassoon. If you just go to YouTube and search for subcontrabassoon sound samples, you can see some, or you can hear some that I've put together. I did that by playing it on contrabassoon twice as fast, and then digitally slowing that down so that it sounds an octave lower at the right speed. And at least with that very imperfect test, I think that there's promise. Hold on, let me make sure I'm okay. Yeah, if just yeah. So subcontrabassoon sound tests, more subcontrabassoon sound tests. There's several different examples in there that you can get a very, very rough idea. Oh, genre, if there is software out there to do that, it's not. I don't think it would be any more accurate than digitally pitching down a contrabassoon. I'm not going to promise that there's not, but yeah. Okay. And I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Mihaly. Right now, my main plan is a scaled up contrabassoon reed, so wide or wider. However, I also have some shapes designed for a large contraforte reed style, so kind of longer and narrower. Just two different approaches to get the same internal reed cavity. I have no idea which ones might be more successful, but I do plan on trying both. Ryan, so I've went back and forth several times on the bassoon style, on the bell style, between a bassoon style straight down bell and a contrabassoon style flared bell. And I still don't. The thing I like about the flared bell is that it's more similar to a contrabassoon. It also isn't pointed straight down at the ground. The main reason I decided to go back to the flared bell is once I started deciding to 3D print some of these larger body joints. 3D printing that complex shape is no problem. The main advantage of the bassoon style bell would be how easy it would be to manufacture. It would be heavier, but it's much easier to manufacture. So right now I am planning on the flared bell, and the main reason is because with 3D printing it's going to be pretty easy to make. I've already made the pieces. They're if you go to the 2019 recap video, you can see those pieces. Will it sound better than the contra when playing in the contra's lowest register? I don't know, but I think it will sound different. in the same way that the low register of a bassoon and the same register an octave higher in the contrabassoon sound different without either one being necessarily bad. They're just, you would use them for different things. I do think there is potential in the lowest range, in the mid range of the contrabassoon to play these. Let me back up. I think there's potential in the mid range of the subcontrabassoon to play passages that would otherwise have to be on the low range of the contrabassoon, in giving them some more giving composers more timbral options there. So if you didn't want that sound of a double reed playing in the bottom of its range, you would have options without having to transpose in an octave higher. Sans the Skeleton asks, I remember seeing your model lacking a pinky F sharp. Are you planning to exclude that key on your prototype? Yes, I'm planning to exclude that in the prototype, but I have designed that key work. So the prototype is going to have very simple, straightforward key work. The only extra keys I'm including are the ones that involve an extra tone hole, because I want to verify that those tone holes are in the best place. So it is going to have an E to F sharp trill key, and it's going to have a third harmonic vent. I didn't include some of the technical alternate key work in the prototype, but I did design that key work so that I know that it can be added later without having to completely redesign the key work. So I think that for the prototype that'll be more than enough. Everyone should play the Subcontrabassoon. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. My thought would be that it would be a kind of the province of contrabassoonists. I mean, I don't see, there's all of these people that are posting videos of these, gigantic saxophones, and that's really interesting for saxophone players, but less interesting for bassoonists, because we don't want to play a really large saxophone that much. Likewise, a really large contrabassoon I don't think is going to be too appealing to people that have spent their careers playing saxophones or clarinets. Or it should be Boss, a euphonium player. Okay, so yeah, Organist 1982. That is an interesting question. So if I had a 3D printer at the beginning of the project, there is a very good chance that I would have done exactly that. Just 3D printed a gigantic tube and a whole bunch of pieces with that you could put a vocal on and see what it sounds like. Now, though, I'm far enough along on some of the physical pieces of the design that I think that it's going to be better just to finish those and check it that way. Now, I will say it is my plan, once the body of the instrument is complete, before I spend a whole lot of time soldering key work and pads and all that, just to cover up the tone holes and manually and play around there to see if, tone holes are almost certainly going to need to be tweaked, repositioned, resized. So doing that before, if that is necessary, doing that before I do all the key work would be in my best interest. When will I make a semi-subcontrabassoon? So, personally, so in all of these instrument families, we've kind of become accustomed to the idea that you need an instrument every half octave. And while that's perfectly valid for certain registers, I personally don't see much reason for an instrument halfway between a contrabassoon and a subcontrabassoon to exist. It's not like you're ever going to be writing for both instruments at the same time and having them play in thirds at the bottom of their range. So that's where I'm at. If I were going to design another double reed instrument, a semi-subcontrabassoon would not be my first choice. So Bradley, if I actually already have a set of pads, so hold on a second. Yeah, so if you just search for subcontrabassoon pads, you can, there's a video of me showing off these pads. They were graciously donated by musicmedic.com. Unfortunately, the project's taken a little longer than I initially had hoped, so this video is 3 years old, but I still have them. They're still in good condition. So those are the pads I'm going to use, at least for the prototype. And Bas, I've already made the Giga Racket is the lowest woodwind that ever needs to exist. I don't see much reason for a lower instrument than that, and if someone else wants to make a bassoon that plays as low as the Giga Racket, more power to them, but it probably won't be me. Like Jacob was hinting at, if I were to make something else, it would probably be, I don't know, like a sopranoon or something weird. Something else on the more conventionally sized area. Okay. Well, Sans, you could just have 2 subcontrabassoons and they can still play in thirds, I guess. Okay. Oh, actually, I've talked about this several times. One thing, after the subcontrabassoon is complete, if I decide to tackle another bassoon design challenge, something I actually would want is a bassoon in the shape of a contrabassoon. It would do nothing but make the bassoon sound worse, but I still want one. So okay, well, the baritone. So you may have seen one of my more recent videos where I talked about a failed live stream. I am planning on coming back to that, and the idea is that I could have I'm going to model something in the computer in such a way that it can adjust to different sizes. So if you wanted to make a baritone, a minor third higher, or a demoron, a major second lower, that you could just type in a transposition amount and it would kind of generate the rough scale of the instrument for you. And I do plan on returning to that. I'm just between the math and the CAD, that's not something I'm probably going to be able to live stream. I'm probably going to have to just do it, make a video about it, and then upload it. But as you may have seen, I have fiber internet now, so uploading videos is no longer a concern. Okay, well, I feel like I've covered everything I wanted to cover, and I've answered a lot of I think everyone who's been kind of following along. I've answered their questions. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. If you enjoy football, by all means, enjoy the Super Bowl. I'm probably going to go see Little Women instead. So, everyone have a great day, and I will hopefully, I will be updating you all more often about the Subcontrabassoon project. Thanks.